Story 1. They would die. I know multiple people whose sole source of income is Social Security. They are not young enough to work, and some can't even drive anymore. They don't have family to look after them. They would die. They would starve, and then they would die. Story 2. No political allegiance is going to matter if you don't give someone money that they are entitled to by paying into it most of their life. The closer to complete the reduction is, the closer to spooky stuff happening. If it's going to be done away with, the first step is to stop collecting it. Story 3. That would impact everyone. In that situation, the trust fund would be depleted, meaning benefits would rely solely on current tax revenues, which are not projected to be enough to cover full payments. Story 4. I'm 57. Most of my friends are around my age. We are all thinking about retirement in the next decade. I can promise you that Social Security retirement benefits are a major consideration for all of us. If Social Security goes away, you will see a generation of elderly people committing suicide or becoming homeless. I have grown kids, but the economy is hard on them as well, and they don't have the means to support me. Edit. A lot of people attacking me for being Generation X. My friends and I all voted for Harris. Story 5. Go back to the reason why Social Security was started. All across the Western world, old people ended up in poor houses or on the street, often dying from exposure and starving to death. That is what you would have. Time to put some billionaires on the proverbial menu. Story 6. If Social Security were seriously reduced, let alone eliminated entirely, it would harm millions of poor, elderly, sick, and disabled people. That would cause enormous unrest and significantly accelerate us toward a major civil conflict or even a civil war. Story 7. Basically the same answer as, what did people do before vaccines and modern medicine? They died. People just died. The same thing here, as we've seen what happens without Social Security. Old people just die in poverty. That's it, end of story. I'd like to think we'd collectively pressure elected officials and parties to avoid or fix that, but I know plenty of retirees who are convinced that Democrats are trying to eliminate Social Security, while Republicans are trying to save it. And we just had an election where a billionaire grifter felon convinced a bunch of working-class Americans he's looking out for them, so I'm not optimistic. An upsettingly large chunk of the country will either buy into the dirty socialism, keep your government hands off my Social Security narrative pushed by conservative outlets, or straight up blame the wrong people, and the end result will simply be that a large number of elderly Americans just die in poverty. Story 8. People will die. This is not an exaggeration. Elderly people rely on this for the basic necessities that sustain their lives. Breaking this social contract in an era of unprecedented corporate greed will be the final failure of end-stage capitalism. Story 9. Me personally, I will probably end up working until the day I drop dead. Even though I've saved for retirement, if Social Security is done away with, the burden of caring for my aging parent financially and physically will fall upon me and my sibling. We could have had Medicare cover long-term care under the Harris administration, and for a brief minute, I had hoped that my parents' lifetime of hard work wouldn't have to be liquidated just so we could afford full-time care for her as she ages. But more Americans bought the lie that immigrants were coming to kill them in their beds and take their jobs, so any hope I had for that is now gone. I will never not be salty. Make no mistake. A lot of disabled folks who qualify and depend on Social Security will die. Period. They will die. There will be no way to pay for both food and medication, no way to care for the disabled child and work full-time to afford housing and food. The folks who are the most physically fragile will be at great risk of humane deaths and starvation or medical neglect. Story 10. My parents worked very hard in middle-class jobs. They saved everything and were extremely frugal. Their favorite restaurant is Panda Express, and they find a road trip to Kansas City thrilling. They buy most of their clothes at thrift stores and have never bought a new car in their lives. Even so, they would face a serious struggle without Social Security. At a certain point, we might as well go back to the Wild West and pay no taxes at all if it's not to support people like them. I'm actually in favor of raising taxes as a concept, but I wanted to feed the hungry, house the poor and elderly, and educate the youth. Instead, taxes are going toward brain chips and rocket ships. I don't care about Mars if my neighbors can't afford groceries. Story 11. Nothing. The majority of Americans will do nothing. They will make excuses, plead with politicians, and so on, but the vast majority will sit back, bemoan the situation, and take it with the hope of a revolution. This is already happening with what the Republican Party is currently doing, and while you see protests on social media, there is little to no news coverage about it all. And secondly, half of the country would live in desperation if it meant it hurt others more. This is the sad reality of the United States political system. Certain media networks have nurtured a fearful, scared, highly distrustful viewership, and they are being fed lies every day. The number of United States voters that are taking reckless actions now is astonishing. People who have lost jobs, Medicare or Medicaid, and are still justifying the cruelty as it hurts others more. Wake up. You have enabled a coup. You have voted for someone who told you all this would happen and more, and now appear to be shocked when it happens. Trump and the Republican Party have done nothing but enrich themselves. Trump will go down as the worst president ever, and history books will mock the United States for subsequently re-electing him even though he is a criminal, which goes against the United States Constitution and the Founding Fathers. History is written by the winners, and you would hope that sooner rather than later the United States realizes it should have taken a left at Albuquerque. Story 12. I have a disabled son who will get Social Security disability insurance when he is 18. I am not sure what I would do, but if there is a large movement of armed violence, then I will help out where I can. I have paid into the system my whole working life because of the promise that it will be there for me. If they take it away, we will take it back. Story 13. Taking everything that people are relying on for survival is going to backfire massively. Once someone has nothing left to lose, violence will be the next likely step. Story 14. I do not think this will happen because there would be civil unrest the likes of which we have not seen in this country since I do not know Fort Sumter. Now, I understand that Donald Trump does not care about the elderly or Americans in general. 1 million Americans died of COVID and he thinks he did a great job. Nor does Elon Musk care about the well-being of anyone other than himself. He has rockets blowing up over populated areas and self-driving cars smashing into things, and he just giggles at that. He is a big believer in eugenics, which is why he keeps having test tube babies with different women and why he would think of elderly people dying in poverty as simple Darwinism that will strengthen the people over time. But members of Congress have to answer to their constituents. House members can be voted out after just 2 years, and they know that even in deeply Republican states, messing with Social Security is a death wish, which it could be, both figuratively and literally. Trump has the Secret Service guarding him, and Musk has enough money to hire a guard to protect him. Bill House Representative and Sally Senator would be far more exposed politically and tactically. How many Americans own guns? A lot. How many would think about using violence to show their displeasure of losing the Social Security benefits they need to live and deserve because they paid into the fund? Even if it is a tiny percentage, that means those members of Congress who give in to Trump will live the rest of their lives in fear. I do not think that is something they would look kindly upon. It is possible that Musk will use his followers to sift through Social Security members and identify those who deserve their benefits and those he decides do not. So maybe if you live in a blue state, you lose 20% of your benefits. You are a registered Democrat? 20% more. You posted on social media that you voted for Harris, or that you would never vote for Trump. Well, you should not get help from a government you do not support, right? That could be one way of keeping Congress and the populace in line, using the threat of inflicting poverty and suffering on millions of Americans who dare exercise their rights in a way Trump does not like. I do not think that would work, but it is a tactic I can see this administration using. Story 15. Then America would become a third world country where everyone, except the rich, has to work until death without any hope of retirement. Social Security is the only reason why most non-wealthy people can retire. Story 16. Like a post on Facebook about how they are not going to stand for this anymore. Then look at the picture of a Denny's Grand Slam they keep beside their Make America Great Again hat and remember happier times. Story 17. I'm not old enough to have paid in for years and years, so I wouldn't be as upset as someone who is 59 or 60. However, I think it's a shame if it goes away. It is nowhere near enough. In fact, at the food bank where I volunteer, most of the recipients are on Social Security, and they qualify for our assistance. It's not like it's a livable wage in today's economy. Anyway, story 18. There are a lot of people saying that there would be riots, but the plan has never been to cut off current recipients. The plan is always to cut off future recipients who do not understand they are getting money stolen from them yet, or are not born yet. Story 19. When they announce it and then follow it up with how those of us still paying into it won't see it reimbursed, they better have good life insurance policies and security because a mob will make short work of them all. I'm not calling for violence, but if you force people to pay into it for decades, end it and then tell us no refund, oh well, things will get real and they will regret the day they ran for office. Story 20. Even Ayn Rand took government assistance in her last years. Funny how these libertarians and fiscal conservatives hate the government until their number comes up. Story 21. What should happen is organized mass gatherings of thousands of people separately marching on the offices and homes of every single member of Congress and millions crowding every single street in Washington, D.C., until such a decision is reversed and robust protections duly passed by Congress and signed by the President. But then again, this is what should have already been happening until the inadequate safety nets that currently do exist were vastly expanded. So what will probably be done by we the people in the face of our ever-dwindling free republic is largely nothing. Story 22. It is unbelievably cruel for them to attack Social Security. Many people will suffer horribly. Old people will end up starving, having to choose between food and their medications. Suddenly, there will be a huge wave of homeless old people, and many will die unnecessarily from all of this. Story 23. Drag the billionaires who are responsible for it out of their mansions and bunkers and tear them to pieces. We are talking Paris in 1789. I do not think the billionaires are quite stupid enough for that. If they are, it is on them. Story 24. As a person who is very near age 61 to collect Social Security, I call it nonsense. I have paid into this for over 40 years, and I want a refund of every last cent. I make a very good salary, so I pay a lot in Social Security and am entitled to collect, as does everyone else who has paid their hard-earned money into it. Not to mention the employers who have been matching the money sent to Social Security. They are a bunch of thieves, and I wish they would just disappear. Story 25. Unfortunately, suicide is my plan for when Medicare and Social Security are gone. I have no family and cannot work. I am one of millions. No one cares but the people who rely on it for survival. Story 26. Each degree it is cut would be a degree greater of senior poverty. Things would get worse for millions. Done away? Oh boy. You just unleashed the most participatory group of the electorate who have time and angered them? I think the Democratic Party could literally just run on "we will restore Social Security" and nothing else. The landslide in 2026 and 2028 would be so comprehensive it would scar the Republican Party for a generation. Story 27. Back when President Bush had the idea to privatize Social Security, the Democrats had successful midterm elections. Even if you look at dictatorships like Russia, you'll see that they usually keep those programs to keep their citizens relatively happy so that they're depoliticized. You'll get to keep your Social Security as long as you stay out of politics and let corruption happen. It's ultimately the reason why President Eisenhower or even President Reagan didn't get rid of these programs. They knew if they went too far with a program that 68 million depend on, people would revolt. Story 28. Riot. That's called theft. We've been paying in for decades. Needing to work with the promise of Social Security safety net contributes to people not rioting now. They can't afford it. Take away Social Security. Story 29. Social Security is the single largest and greatest anti-poverty program the United States has ever implemented. Removing it would be devastating, and the repercussions would ripple through the entire American economy. If they make a change, they will probably write it to affect people under 55 or most likely pick a birth year, for example, those born after 1968. That way, they can tout the savings while delaying the repercussions from the voters. It is funny how unaware Americans are. Cutting taxes for individuals like Elon Musk and Donald Trump is claimed to stimulate the economy and pay for itself. However, if elderly people are left without sufficient support, leading them to eat inadequate meals or become homeless, that is perceived as saving the government money. This is just unreasonable.